Hello, and welcome to principle number 5 of the Philosophy of Flourishing, this mini series that has kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own. It forms part of hopefully the book that I end up writing because it's really, really useful context. And this principle number 5, be useful, caps off the last couple of weeks of writing some interesting stuff. Well, I hope it's interesting. Certainly interesting for me, and sets up the next phase of what I want to write about. This essay was actually really quite hard, certainly to record, because my dog kept running in, and then people kept knocking on the door, and that doesn't make for a conducive recording experience. So apologies if you hear any of that in the background. Should be edited out. I started this essay, ummed about this, but I started this essay by talking about Genesis 1 and the creation story. And just as a kind of precursor or a setting the scene or a foundation to the fact that we are kind of put on this earth, or feel like we're put on this earth to be useful and to do something and to make something and to create something and to leave a mark or whatever it might be. And then we go and explore all of these different ways that we can be useful in order to flourish, but also some of the ways that we can pretend that we're being useful. We might believe that we're being useful, but we're maybe being useful in the wrong direction. I think the biggest challenge for me personally was Emerson's challenge, which is do your work and I will know you. Basically, be proud of what you do, take pride in your work, and I will know you because of the work that you have created. It almost feels to Emerson like it's part of himself that has created this work, which obviously reading that puts a bit of onus on me to try and make these essays good and as a relatively good representation of the work, the real work that goes into writing each and every one of these. I also have a nice bit on The Bonfire of the Vanities, book by Tom Wolfe, turned into a film. I don't think it was a very good film, with Tom Hanks and Kim Cattrall. There's a couple of minutes of clip there as well. And at the end, I reach a bit of a conclusion to the whole 5-parter. Do hold on until the end. And then next week, we're going to take a little bit of time, because the next week we are going to look at a neuroscientist's view of flourishing, focusing on the massive book that is actually just behind me in my screen, The Master and His Emissary, which, as you can see, if you look hard enough, I've almost finished. And not only is it a very long book, but the font is extremely small. So I'm quite proud of myself for almost getting all the way through it. So until next week, on with the essay. The Philosophy of Flourishing. Principle 5, be useful. We are put on this earth to be useful, to put in the work, to make an imprint, however shallow, on the world. We are, according to the biblical origin story in Genesis 1, made in the image of God, who worked hard for 6 days, making the heavens and the earth, separating land from sea, and populating it with a menagerie of plants and trees, animals and birds. In this first chapter of the Bible, God compels Adam to be fruitful and increase in number, to fill the earth and subdue it. Thus, despite the infinity of the Garden of Eden, God crafted humans to be active and useful, creating a crucial separation between us and animals who have the luxury of not having to hold dominion over their gardens. We cannot flourish if we sit on the sidelines, consuming and never producing. As Emerson compels, do your work and I shall know you. Do the work and you shall reinforce yourself. We flourish when we take pride in our work, producing something of value that is representative of our energies and our talents. For Emerson, a man is relieved and gay when he has put his heart into his work and has done his best. But what he has said or done otherwise shall give him no peace. Not only do we reinforce ourselves through our work, but we also have a compulsion to be useful. Even if we do manage to solve the economic problem of scarcity, As Keynes hypothesizes in his 1930 essay, The Economic Possibilities of Our Grandchildren, we still have an inherent desire to be useful. He talks of the old Adam, which is so strong that everybody will need to do some work if he is to be contented. However, this work will be unshackled from necessity and can therefore become more aligned with the higher desires of esteem and ultimately, to use the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. But how should we define usefulness? Not surely by its connection to power or possession, status or acquisition. Our philosophers judiciously warn against striving for achievement and prestige. These artifices keep us running up our cosmic travelator, our movements of conquest and achievement becoming, at best, fleeting, and at worst, a propellant for ever greater achievement. In Tom Wolfe's satire, The Bonfire of the Vanities, the protagonist Sherman McCoy, so-called master of the universe and millionaire bond trader at the white shoe investment bank Pierce & Pierce, is driven to destruction by New York's insatiable lust for power and money. In the city, Wolfe writes, money is more than money. It's proof that you're winning. Wolfe was only too aware of the futility of McCoy's profession. He didn't manufacture anything. He didn't build anything. He didn't even buy or sell anything. He just moved money around. McCoy's $3 million penthouse and extravagant lifestyle are the rewards that modern society has placed on his usefulness. However, his work was empty. All that talent, all that drive, devoted to what? To moving electrons across a screen? Ultimately, McCoy's downfall, the naked fact of his failure, is a tale as old as time, an Icarus flying too close to the sun. A man with all the illusions, all the arrogance, brought low by an unsentimental city whose machinery has turned against him. Nor should we consider human usefulness as the way a hammer is useful for knocking in pegs or a robotic arm is useful for the assembly of cars. Being useful should be distinct from having utility. Our purpose is not to mindlessly become ever more refined, utility-producing cogs in a complex and abstracted economic system, nor should we seek to become merely ever more productive inputs into a system in which we have no agency. We should not seek to be useful at the expense of our humanity. We should not seek to be useful at the expense of our humanity. Too often, our desire for conformity, to fit in and to be useful, can result in a slavish commitment and a life of drudgery. In George Orwell's Animal Farm, the faithful cart horse Boxer, who can only remember 4 letters of the alphabet but wants to learn the rest upon his retirement, which never happens, is Orwell's metaphor for the utility-producing working class. Boxer lives by his famous epitaph, "I must work harder," only to collapse from overwork. We should also be wary of going too far the other way, abstracting ourselves from the pell-mell of life, behaving as Bartleby the Scrivener in Herman Melville's classic 1853 short story. In his story, an unnamed lawyer hires Bartleby as a scrivener or a copyist. At first, he works diligently, but quickly starts refusing tasks with a simple retort, "I would prefer not to." In stark contrast to Orwell's Boxer, Bartleby conscientiously objects to a life of drudgery and bureaucratic paper pushing. Ironically, he meets the same end as Boxer, this time in prison, dying of starvation, having preferred not to eat. Our philosophers believe that being useful, and therefore working towards a condition of flourishing, is to fit as a round peg fits snugly into its rightful hole. For Aristotle, we can only achieve a state of eudaimonia, or flourishing, if we live a life of activity in accordance with our function. And I quote, "Perhaps we shall find the best good if we first find the function of a human being. For just as for a flute player, a sculptor, or any craftsman, and in general for all things that have a function or activity, the good and the well is thought to reside in the function, So it would seem to be for a human being if he has a function. For Aristotle, living well means doing something, not just being in a particular state or a certain condition. It is a lifelong pursuit of what Maslow calls self actualization, the highest rung on his hierarchy of needs, characterized by a fulfilling of the potential that is unique to each of us. It is a feeling of being in the right place at the right time, at one with ourselves, our surroundings, our work, and our function. Maslow agrees with Aristotle, stating that a musician must make music, an artist must paint, a poet must write. What a man can be, he must be. But maybe this puts too much pressure on us. Maybe instead of searching for our function, only to grow disheartened when we realize that we don't have a defined calling, we should look to the life that we are crafting as our function for its own sake. Montaigne takes the craft and function of life extremely seriously. I have put all of my efforts into forming my life. This is my trade and my work. Montaigne is not searching for a higher calling. There is no hubris or striving, but a simple desire to make the best life possible and be useful in accordance with his talents and his interests. For our philosophers, an important constituent of flourishing is the collective nature of usefulness. We can only flourish if we prove to be useful to and for others. Usefulness, detached from the economic transactional concept of utility, implies a mutuality, the giving of our talents and work as part of our contribution to the wider pot of human work, in order to create a functioning society. As Ian McGilchrist argues, it is mutuality, not reciprocity, fellow feeling, not calculation, which is both the motive and the reward for successful cooperation. Later on, he goes further, referencing Max Scheller's pyramid of values, to argue that we can only unlock the higher values, those that sit beyond bland utility and towards bravery, courage, beauty, intelligence, and holiness, when we are an active and useful part of a community, looking outwards onto the world instead of providing narrow utility as a means for our own survival. Ultimately, then, to be useful is not to vainly pursue a higher calling or a singular function. It is to be active, gaining a sense of satisfaction and a feeling of pride through daily compounding activity. It is doing something that has benefit to other people in accordance with the activities that align best with our abilities and our interests. Maybe, therefore, to be useful is simply to cultivate our garden. This wonderful phrase, concluding Voltaire's Candide, comes after the eponymous protagonist and his erstwhile companion Pangloss have been expelled from a beautiful castle with great kicks to the behind, turned over to the Inquisition, roamed America on foot, run the Baron through with a fine thrust of your sword, lost all your sheep from the good land of El Dorado, only to arrive at a small farm in Turkey, twiddling their thumbs and wondering what to do with their time. After such a rich and vivid life, Candide, Pangloss, the philosophical Martin, and the prudent Cacambo are ambling back to their little farm when they meet a worthy old man taking the air at his door and start talking. After a while, the old man invites the companions into his house and serves various homemade sorbets, some cognac spiced with candied citron peel, oranges, lemons, limes, pineapples, and pistachios. Impressed by the old man's generous hospitality, Candide inquires into the size of the man's estate. I have but 20 acres, the man replies. I cultivate them with my children. Our work keeps at bay the three great evils: boredom, vice, and necessity. Back at the farm, Candide reflects on the words of the old man. That worthy old man seems to have created for himself an existence far preferable to that of the 6 kings with whom we had the honor of dining. After his life of action and travel, experience and memory, Candide arrives at the conclusion that we must simply cultivate our garden. Pangloss replies, "You are right. For when man was placed in the Garden of Eden, he was put there ut operatur to dress it and to keep it, so that he might work, which proves that man was not born for rest. Impatient, Martin concludes their philosophizing. Let us set to work and stop proving things. And so Candide and his companions build the best of lives, tending with good cheer to their garden. Conclusion to the philosophy of flourishing. What does it mean to flourish? To live a life well aligned to ourselves and to our shared human nature. We can conclude from this brief review of some of the Western world's greatest philosophers that we must use our heads, trust our guts, get out into the world, embrace our humanity, and make ourselves useful. Humans are complex and messy, so it is likely that a combination of these principles for flourishing will be useful to different degrees and at different times in our lives. Extremity is not a condition of human flourishing. To flourish is neither to live in a gilded mansion or a ceramic tub. It is neither to live as animals in a lowly state of nature, nor inside a locked study alone with our thoughts until madness descends. We flourish when we have balance, just enough time for friendship, solitude, nature, and work. We know when we are flourishing when the external forces of our work, relationships, and locale exist to support us feeling more like ourselves and more like humans. It is the quiet feeling of satisfaction after a long day and the sound night's sleep, knowing that we have done enough. It is the joy in the present, neither residing in the past nor worrying about the future. Art philosophers have gamely tried to define the principles of flourishing through their work, often coming to the same, childlike conclusion. To flourish, according to our philosophers, is simply to be more human. Emerson asserts, "Here stand I cannot otherwise," acknowledging that no man can violate his nature, while Montaigne sees his philosophy represented in his actions. It is myself, it is my essence. He concludes with a wonderful assertion that just about sums it all up. We say, I have done nothing much today. What? Have you not lived? That is not only the most fundamental, but the most illustrious of your occupations.